Well, I'm joined now live by the Education Secretary, Michael Gove. Labour's saying that this is humiliating to have to come to the Commons to announce this U-turn. You yourself admit it was a mistake, it was an error. How did you end up in that position?
I was too ambitious. This was a bridge too far. I wanted to make a series of changes to GCSEs because, as many of the people you've interviewed have acknowledged, they needed to improve. One of the changes that I wanted to make was to see if we could combat what had been the case in the past with exam boards competing the one against the other in order to offer easier qualifications. And I thought that one of the ways we could get round that was by having one exam board per subject in core academic qualifications. But as the exam regulator Ofqual pointed out, strengthening qualifications across the board and at the same time changing the examination market was just one reform too many. And so I thought it was wise then to concentrate on where there was a consensus and to acknowledge that having put forward this proposal, which was dear to my heart, that it wasn't appropriate now to press ahead.
Your word is ambitious. That's a flattering term. Actually, other people might think it's incompetent, that you should have thought this through before dashing ahead. You're too much of a man in a hurry.
I am a man in a hurry. I desperately want to improve state education, and there are a series of changes that we've put forward, many of which have been criticised as being overly radical, or they were when they were introduced, and have now become the common sense of our age.
But it doesn't seem common sense to teachers if you're announcing things and then withdrawing them. It just gives a sense that at the very top of the system, there's a man who doesn't know what he's doing.
Well, I hope that it's been clear that in a number of areas, from the changes that we've made to school structures through the Academies programme, and also the changes that we've made, for example, to school teachers' pay and conditions and to teacher training, that we're being very radical. And as I say, some of those reforms were bitterly contested when we introduced them and have now been accepted. This was one area where I put forward a proposition and we explicitly consulted on it. And I recognised that it was ambitious and radical. But the reason to have the consultation was to see where a consensus would emerge and where either the profession or others would consider that we were being too radical. And I see it as my role specifically to be the person in the education system who's being most demanding. And when the shoe pinches, when we're pushing too far, too fast, then I'll acknowledge that. But it's my job to insist the education system.
This kind of haste isn't without its consequences. We heard from a 13-year-old in the programme. It's not just the teachers that you're fighting. She said she found it all sort of baffling. You know, they're finding it very difficult. So there are consequences to this kind of approach.
I absolutely acknowledge that it's important that 13-year-olds and others make the right choice. And that's why we need to change things in order to ensure that, for example, some of the qualifications that existed before we came to power, which were essentially taking students down a cul-de-sac, down a dead end, have gone. The world's changing. The world is complex. We need to make sure that students are equipped with the knowledge and skills necessary to navigate today's challenges. And that means that there are some quite technical questions about grading and the curriculum that we wouldn't expect to be the stuff of classroom or playground conversation.
No, but there should be clarity for that.
Resolved.
And there isn't. You would have to admit, you've come before the Commons today to say you'd made an error. There is no clarity at the moment. And one of the other areas that they're finding very frustrating is the way that you're being very critical of GCSEs. We heard the head teacher saying that his pupils found that very bad. They were sitting these exams at the same time that, in effect, the Education Secretary was trashing them.
Well, I hope there's no lack of clarity about what we've chosen to do today, to move away from reforms to the exam market to end competition, but to press ahead with improving GCSEs. And I listened to Jeff Barton with interest. I mean, Jeff is a brilliant head teacher and a fantastic advocate for English. But he made 2 points. He said that at the moment there were problems with GCSEs, that students were like Alsatians being driven through burning hoops, and that we needed proper, fit-for-purpose GCSEs. That's where the consensus lies, and the changes that we're making will deal with some of the problems that Jeff and others have brought to our attention to do with too much assessment and not enough learning.
Let's be clear about the kind of thing that you were saying was an error today. This was simply about only having one exam board per subject, but you're pressing ahead with the reformed GCSEs. So actually, aren't you really pressing ahead with the principle of the EBCs, but you've just dropped the name?
Well, we have dropped the name, and we have deliberately said that there is one significant change, and it would have been a big change, that we're no longer pressing ahead with, and that's because I bit off more than I could chew. And what we need to do is to concentrate on improving the quality of existing qualifications rather than making a reform to the market. Now, of course, different people will pass judgment on whether or not the the reform that I had been thinking of was, something that should have, been looked at in a different way. Some people will think that I should have pressed ahead. Indeed, there were a couple of people in the House of Commons today urging me to do just that. But I felt that it was important to separate two things. And the exam regulator was very clear about this, that they welcomed the idea of tougher exams. They could see a case for market reform, but to do both at the same time would be to put too much strain on the system.
But it does sound like you're going to go ahead in the end with having one exam board per subject.
No.
You're ruling that out for all time?
I wouldn't rule it out for all time.
Because you've said in the past, haven't you, that this was a very bad idea to have all these competing exam boards. You said this is what was leading to exam inflation.
Well, I certainly...
Grade inflation.
Absolutely. I said it was an idea. It is an idea that was dear to my heart. But we were attempting to do too much. There are many changes that are happening in the education system. I think they're important. I think that we need to press ahead with vigour. But I also recognise sometimes that you need to cut your losses, that concentrate on the changes which will actually bring the quickest and the broadest benefit. And that's why we're making changes to the curriculum and to GCSEs.
Now, you've had to admit an error because of pressing ahead too fast in one area, yet you're bringing in another massive change, which is what's happening with the national curriculum. So teachers are going to have to completely change the way they teach things. We heard from the History Association earlier, they're very worried by the sheer demand that you're going to be placing on teachers, which could end up with rote learning. That's not what you want, is it?
Well, I think there is a problem with rote learning at the moment. I think there is a problem because our current examination system and indeed our current curriculum encourage bite-sized learning and superficial knowledge. The history curriculum is out for consultation. There's now an opportunity for people to feed in their views. But one thing I wanted to put out there was a document which stressed the importance of people understanding chronology. One of the biggest problems that we have in the understanding of history today is people don't know what came next. So you might have students who will study the Victorians and then leap backwards or forwards in time without that connection. We've spelt out some of the, I think, very important milestones in Britain's history and Britain's relationship with the rest of the world. And there's now a chance for us to have, I think, a proper, mature and informed debate about how that can be taught effectively.
So we could see a U-turn on that as well, could we?
Well, by definition, if you put forward a proposition for consultation and there are some interesting arguments that are put forward, you take account of them. I think one of the lessons of history, which I hope our new curriculum will embody, is that progress in England has been achieved by politicians putting forward propositions, listening to the opposition and then achieving a synthesis. Every great reform, whether it's been the extension of the franchise or the transformation of the condition of the people in the 19th century, has been driven by politicians who wanted to make opportunity more equal, who've tried hard with a clear vision to ensure that opportunity is extended more widely, and have acknowledged that if you can bring people with you and secure a broader consensus with a nip here, a tuck there, or a retreat elsewhere, then it's worthwhile.
If history books are ever written about you, this isn't going to go down as a very good day, is it?
I don't know. I'm not worried what people think about me. I'm worried about making sure that students are given the opportunity to enjoy a curriculum and qualifications which can stand comparison with the world's best. Now, my old mum said that self-praise is no honour, so I'll leave it to other people to pass a verdict on me.
Michael Gove, many thanks indeed.